Welcome, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Monday, November 30th, as we get you ready for the football offseason and an exciting stretch for Virginia Tech basketball. On today's episode, we're going to go ahead and talk the college football transfer portal, roster attrition, NIL, and a whole lot of Virginia Tech basketball in the second half of our show today. All that and more coming up right now on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Episode 272 gets going right here. We welcome you in, whether you are listening or watching on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you go ahead, like, and subscribe while you're there, and also turn on the notifications so that you don't miss any of our future podcasts on YouTube. This edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Who you choose to bank with you can make all the difference in your overall experience. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. All right, let's get some introductions out of the way here. Let's introduce our crew today. We have Will Stewart to the far side. We have Chris Coleman here to my right, lead analyst and columnist. In the fourth chair, David Cunningham today. Behind the scenes producing is Nick Brown. Carter Hill will swap into the fourth chair in our second half of the show today. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Guys, how was everybody's Thanksgiving to ease into things today?
It was good. It was, I guess that's the first time we haven't had to cover
a football game
on Thanksgiving weekend ever.
As long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So, you know, the reason was not good, but it was nice to have that time with family. So a couple things. I learned how to carve a turkey. I used to just kind of stick a fork in it and hack at it, but I went and watched YouTube videos, and if you do it right, it's amazing. It goes really fast and it looks a lot better. So, and the other thing is, welcome to the host chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to take a minute to pimp your regular gig, which is TSL Today. So for those of you that don't know Giovanni Heater, we call him Gio. He's been hosting TSL Today for us, which is a new, strictly student-run production. And I think we're finally getting TSL Today where we want it. And the intent of TSL Today is that it's audio video content, just like the podcast, and it winds up on all our podcast feeds. I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's intended to be shorter, more newsy, and it is actually intended to be up in the afternoons in time for your drive home. And This is a show that is 20 to 30 minutes long. So you can pull it up on your drive home and listen to it. And I think you guys have been doing a great job. And the first edition was something like 42 minutes.
Yeah,
so the mantra became shorter. And you guys are doing a good job. So I want to take time to promote that. Either look for it on YouTube or on, wherever you listen to podcasts. So welcome. And it is episode 274.
Yes.
That's kind of funny. So last night, Gio texts Katie and says, "Can you send me your script for, opening the show?" And of course, Katie sent him the one from show 272. So that's why Gio said 272. So
Rookie move.
Well, it continues a string of first-time hosts always flub something.
Yeah, that definitely felt like, compared to TSL Today, that was the roughest open I've ever had on the set. So.
When I host podcasts, I'm fine hosting them. I hate the very beginning.
Right, and then you ease into it.
Because you get a little, it's ridiculous.
Right.
You get a little jittery, but then you get into the show and it's all good.
Absolutely.
Well, so, welcome.
Appreciate the opportunity, guys. Let's get into a little bit of Virginia Tech football here. I want to start out a little bit of news here. 6 Hokies selected All-ACC honorable mention. Tywan Garbett, Dax Hollifield, Mansour Delane, Caleb Smith, Silas Danzy, and this one's kind of a little bit of a surprise in the special teams unit. Tucker Holloway, after that big 90-yard return. Chris, this is the first time ever that Virginia Tech didn't have at least a third-team All-ACC player, with the exception of Virginia Tech being independent from 1965 to 1991. This is the first time since 1950 that Virginia Tech doesn't have a single first, second, or third team all-conference player. Just a tough stretch, tough season. What are your thoughts on that?
We keep going back to the early 50s with breaking these records. Maybe next year we can get back to the 40s. Let's hope not.
I remember at first it was like, this is their first losing record since 1992, and then they started doing all kinds of things that haven't been done since the 1950s.
Right. We got back to the 70s, and then we got back to the 50s. Gosh.
Right.
I think Mansour Delane, if he had started the whole season, would be higher than that.
Yeah, I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the rest of the conference to know if he would have been.
He seems to be one of the at least top 4 corners in the conference.
Yeah.
I think he had an excellent season. Tucker Holloway is interesting. It's harder to return punts these days because special teams coaches, they have these strategies of kicking away from punters and things like that. So he got that based on one game, basically. I wish he hadn't played against Liberty and they'd redshirted him, and he'd be the first redshirt ever to get all conference honors.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, look, we know the talent level was down this year, but we also saw some guys on offense who had played well in the past who didn't play well this year,
as well.
Like Parker Clements, I know was a good football player because he was a third-team freshman PFF All-American last year. Like one of the best freshman offensive linemen in the entire country. And then this year he honestly couldn't block for most of the year. Yeah. It's not a Parker Clements thing. So
it's adjustment to a new scheme.
Right,
and that sort of stuff.
Right. So they have to improve their talent level at certain spots for sure, but they've got to make sure they're running things that their players can execute too. So we're not having the same conversation about nobody on the All-ACC teams again next year.
So, I think that people are using that as fodder to say Virginia Tech doesn't have talent. That's not entirely true. And you just put up an example of a guy who is talented. Yeah. He just didn't have as good a season. So when you sit there and look at the roster and say, oh, there's no All-ACC caliber players on the roster, there are ACC caliber, All-ACC caliber players lurking on this roster. I think
Caleb Smith could have done better than that if he had had help.
Yeah, if he hadn't been bracket covered,
right?
For if there were other receivers that could take the heat off of him. So there is some talent here. It's just and you don't want to be in our position and sound like you're making excuses for the coaches,
right?
There is talent on this team, and the hope for the offseason, which we'll get into a lot of, is that the players get more accustomed to the systems, the coaches get better and more cohesive at it, and that talent is allows to rise up and play as well as it can play.
Well, for what it's worth, this is also the first time that Virginia Tech, since joining the ACC, does not have an ACC Coach of the Year in the first year that a coach is eligible. So Beamer in 2004, Fuente in 2016, obviously Brent Pry, no cigar in 2022.
Flipping over to basketball, Seth
Greenberg was ACC Coach of the Year in Tech's first year in basketball.
Interesting.
I believe, so.
Interesting. Well, maybe Mike Young can, obviously not his first year, it's his fourth year. Maybe he can make things happen this year. Transfer portal opens on December 5th. National Signing Day is December 21st. So 2 very important dates for Hokies fans to be on the lookout for. I know David has had the opportunity to spend some time with Coach Pry during media availability, wrote a lot about it in his article. So just kind of a general question for everyone on set. How is this staff approaching the transfer portal and possible NFL opportunities for their guys and guys that want to leave, guys that want to stay, and how are they going through that adventure?
So I want to ask a question to clarify something first. You talked about the transfer portal opening on December 5th, but we've seen players on Twitter say they're going into the portal.
Correct.
Is that, Chris, is that just the players saying it ahead of time and it will become official on December 5th?
The only players who are officially in the portal right now are guys who have had coaching changes. They have an exemption. They can officially enter the portal. So, like, when Wisconsin fired their coach in late September, early October, whenever it was, we saw some of the Wisconsin players officially enter the portal, and they were done.
Okay.
Everybody who hasn't had a coach get fired, and also they're not officially in there until
FCS
Monday.
Players are officially
they're officially in it. Their window starts earlier.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only Tech player to announce right now is DJ Harvey.
That's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
And so I guess by the rules, even though DJ's gone on Twitter and said he's going to transfer,
can't be recruited.
Coaches are not allowed to talk to him yet until December 5th, and he's officially in it.
Officially.
You know that it's already happening,
Right.
and the way it happens is, that these players know a lot of other players. So when they announce they're going into the portal, if there's a coach somewhere that's interested, he just finds some other player on his team who knows DJ Harvey and says, "Oh, hit him up and tell him we're interested." That's the way they get around that.
That's how West Virginia communicated with Doug Nestor.
Yeah, and that's the example we talk about. Yeah, Doug already knew a ton of people on West Virginia's team.
So what do you think the approach is here for Virginia Tech? How do you? It seemed like in a lot of his quotes, Brent Pry was very leaving it up to the players, saying things like, here's our opinion, but at the end of the day, this is your decision to make with your family. Here's what we would do if we were in your shoes. But we want people here that want to be here. And he said, we'll support you wherever you go. If you decide to go to another school or the NFL, he said, we'll support you along the way.
I mean, Virginia Tech is right now, to me, I did the scholarship count article yesterday. I think there's somewhere between 90 and 93 scholarships. If everybody who was eligible returned next year, and all the true freshmen commits sign. Obviously, the limit is 85.
Right.
So they've got to be down to 85. They're going to have to drop 5 to 8 players just to make room for all the freshmen who have committed.
Before they take anybody from the portal.
Before they even add to this recruiting class or before they take anybody from the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So there's going to be large amounts of attrition this year for Virginia Tech. And I think last year, Power 5 programs averaged 17 transfer portal guys out.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
No, some of that is a little heavy because the NCAA decided to give everybody an extra year due to COVID, but said, schools can still only have 85 scholarships. The result is a bunch of dudes get cut.
And there's also there was new legislation, or you can just transfer and not have to sit out.
Correct.
I don't know exactly when that came along.
Right.
So I think those two things you're talking about have created a rush to the portal that will slow down in coming years. You've got some really interesting stats about, out of all the FBS players that go into the portal, how many land at another FBS program?
The last 2 years, I think the numbers have been 28% and 29%. It's a higher number, about 30%, that don't end up anywhere. So so just because so-and-so offensive tackle from Wisconsin or Ohio State or whoever enters the portal, don't just assume that they're good enough.
I did a project on this last year for school.
Right.
About the amount of guys that end up nowhere.
Yeah. Look, this is nothing new. You go back up and down. I might do this as a project for the offseason. You go up and down tech media guides from the 90s. You'll go through, look at all those old recruiting classes, match them up to the media guide, and then one year you'll see, so-and-so's not on the team anymore.
Where'd that guy go?
People left the program. Right. I mean, this is not new, of players who aren't in the 2 deep or 3 deep leaving the program early. If you pay close attention to Pry's comments yesterday, he talked about cultural fits and things like that. So, he's going to move some dudes on.
Right.
No question. And scholarships are renewable on a year-by-year basis. You don't have to renew anybody's scholarship. Now, the exception to that is the new rule is if you take a transfer portal guy starting this year, that guy's scholarship automatically renews every year. So you can't just be out there taking anybody in the transfer portal. You've really got to vet guys to make sure they're good enough and to make sure they're cultural fits for your program. Because if you bring them in here and they turn out to be a locker room cancer, you can't go to them and say, your scholarship's not being renewed for next year.
Right.
You're stuck with them.
Interesting.
And so the interesting thing about the way the world is different from how it was 20 years ago is we've all seen old movies and things like that where a coach decides he doesn't like a player and he rides that player until the guy quits and makes life hell for him. You can't really do that these days. Word gets out.
Right.
Players didn't have any communication or any power back then. So, that's not super relevant to what you're saying. It's just something I thought of.
I mean, players want to play.
Yeah.
If you tell a guy, look, you're the 4th string defensive end, I don't ever see you rising higher than that. He's going to leave, and you don't have to, officially cut him.
Yeah,
right?
So even though you are bound to honor the scholarship for people that portal in, there's also the possibility they'll portal back out, like Hazelton, Damon Hazelton as an example. Am I getting the name right?
Yes.
Hazelton came from, where did he come from? Ball State?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then portaled out to Missouri. You could have situations like that.
Right. And I think the biggest importance has to be just transparency across the line. If a coach tells a guy, you're probably going to be 3 deep for the rest of your career, and they can appreciate that and take their talents somewhere else.
Sure. The thing with DJ Harvey is I think DJ Harvey has potential. He was only a redshirt freshman this year, but think about it. Delane is already ahead of him, and Dorian Strong's ahead of him. And because Dorian Strong is going to take a redshirt this year because he only played in 4 games, and because 2020 didn't count towards eligibility, Dorian Strong has 3 years of eligibility left. Wow. Just like Mansour Delane, just like DJ Harvey.
Yeah.
So DJ Harvey is in a position where he would never have an opportunity to start here if he stayed, unless one of those other guys leaves.
And I thought there was a window there where they had him returning punts. I thought, let's see what he can do. Maybe he can make a name for himself there. And that didn't work out, and he got passed over by Holloway there.
Absolutely. Chris, Coach Price said that he wants to see competition in every single room, including quarterback this offseason. So what position rooms do you see the most competition surfacing here, and where is there a need and a demand for some serious competition?
On offense, there's a need at almost every position. Like, I wouldn't worry too much about tight end if Gallo comes back and uses his COVID year, because then you've got Gallo, you got Daquan Wright, you got Harrison St. Germain, who played in 4 games this year.
Still
and
has
then
his red shirt.
So I think you've got a solid 3 deep there. But if Gallo, how he's playing on his phone, he didn't push
I'm looking
the
at
red
Nick.
button.
I'm like, Nick, the word red shirt got uttered.
At any rate, where was I?
Sorry.
Tight ends. So that's a solid 3 deep at tight end if Gallo comes back. If Gallo doesn't come back, then you got Daquan Wright, you got St. Germain, you got Benji Gosnell, who is redshirting this year, coming off 2 torn ACLs. Yeah. So, and I'm not saying Benji Gosnell can't do it. But you don't know that. You don't know that, and you're not going to know that for a while. He's not going to be back practicing until fall camp probably, or the summer at the earliest. So I feel like if Gallo decides he needs to leave and doesn't want to use his COVID year, then tight end would be a position you target. And if that's the case, then I'm open to taking a guy in the portal for every single position on offense. Quarterback to create competition. No, I don't want to take some senior, because Tech is starting over at quarterback every year, basically, and I'm sick of it.
And that was part of the promise of Grant Wells coming in, is the eligibility
correct.
he has remaining.
And I still think our issues offensively are more others than Grant Wells, but my worry about Wells is he has no confidence in anything around him now.
Yeah.
And confidence can be very difficult to get back.
Yeah.
So if you bring in somebody for competition there, I want them to have multiple years. So if they won the job this year, then they would be the returning starter next year, hopefully, rather than bringing in a senior to replace Wells. So you start over again this year, and then you start over again the next year. You don't want to keep going down that vicious cycle. That was why it was very important to develop Wells this year, and Tech failed to do it. They didn't put a competent product on the field around him, which didn't allow him to develop. And now his confidence is shot, I think. Running back, you got 2 guys who always get hurt. You can't rely on them being 100% next year. So I would, if I could find a durable running back, I would take Blake Watson from ODU, who's in the portal, if he was willing.
Now, running back is a guy that, like a Khalil Herbert, you can take a guy for 1 year. I'm totally good with that.
Sure, right. Absolutely. Wide receiver, yes. Yeah. Obviously.
Yep.
Offensive line, yes. A true offensive tackle for sure. I don't know where they are in terms of their feelings about Jack Holyfield taking over the starting center position next year. They could do that, or they could move one of the Moores inside the center. So you could take a center guard type to go along with a tackle, but I would a true tackle at the very least.
Yeah,
I would prefer 2 or 3 offensive linemen in the portal. Defensively, I think you'd like to have a natural pass rusher at defensive end. I don't think there's a need at defensive tackle unless Kendricks and Pollard don't come back.
So let's. I've been wanting to touch on that for a while. I think Kendricks and Pollard are underappreciated. Are they dominant NFL-style defensive tackles? No. Are they very good players? Yes. I was looking through PFF the other day, and I believe Delane's the number 1 graded player on the defense, and I think Kendricks and Pollard are right behind him.
There, yeah.
These guys are good, dependable players who, knock on wood, for the most part, stay healthy.
Yeah. Up the middle on defense was not the issue this year. Linebacker, I don't know. It depends on if they feel like they've got a lot of young linebackers in the program. Kelly Lawson developed really well this year, so he's going to start.
All he's got to do is hit the weight room,
right?
Yep.
You got to figure out who your Mike's going to be. Do you feel like your Mike? Do you feel like you can have a solid 2 deep at Mike from guys who are within the program? If not, Mike could be a position they could target. I don't see the need at cornerback to bring anybody in because you've got Delane, you've got Strong, Chapman's eligible to come back.
Put Cam Johnson in the weight room.
Yeah, well, he's got a knee injury. I don't know what kind of knee injury it is, but I'm guessing it's not great. Devin Alvis is another guy they're high on, but again, he hurt his knee same day Cam Johnson did, and I don't know what the extent of the knee injury. So their types of injuries to their knees could determine whether Tech could bring in a transfer portal guy. But they got Dante Lovett coming in, who I think is capable of playing right away. So, like, I don't consider corner to be a need, and quite frankly, those two starting spots are locked down. So you're unlikely to get like a good player in the portal when he knows he's not going to start. So safety could be a possibility. They wanted to get a safety last year and couldn't find one. They wanted to get an offensive lineman, at least one last year, and couldn't find one. So it's easy to say, oh, just sign some portal guys and we'll be better. Well, they tried to sign some more portal guys than they did last year, and they failed. They tried to.
Jaden Blue didn't really pan out.
Yeah, they tried to sign the defensive tackle from Richmond who went to Wake and became one of the highest grading defensive tackles in the country. Kobe Turner. They didn't get him. They lost out on the JMU receiver who went to South Carolina and had a big year. He was from Richmond, went to Highland Springs. Spurn Tech went to South Carolina. They lost out on whatever offensive lineman they tried to target. They couldn't find a safety. So they basically They got two positions last year, and they tried to get players at 2 or 3 other positions and failed. So they got to do a better job in the transfer portal this year than they did last year.
Well, we hate to keep going back to Coach Pry, but again, shout out to David for pulling out all these quotes in his media availability time, because Pry had some really good things to say to close out the season here. He stated that he does not anticipate any coaching staff changes, and he also hasn't flinched at the talent of his offensive coordinator, Tyler Bowen. That's a direct quote. So, Chris, how can this fan base kind of digest that coming up to next season? Tyler Bowen will definitely be the offensive coordinator. I know you've mentioned before that sometimes the titles of coaches can change or support staff can change to kind of on the surface say some different things, but really it's all internal. Just kind of your thoughts on zero coaching staff changes to be expected.
I don't care what their titles are. It's a matter of coaching talent. That's the most important thing, and whether these guys have it or not. It's 1 year. We don't know. So this is going to be long. So I'm going to do a quote from Brent Pry, and then I'm going to go through some numbers.
Right.
All right. Credit to David for putting this on Twitter, so I've got it. This is from Brent Pry at his press conference earlier this week talking about his offensive coaching staff. I think always in the beginning, a staff coming together from some different backgrounds, different philosophies, which I knew we had coming into this, those guys meshing and coming together and settling on certain things is important. And I think who we thought we wanted to be initially, we struggled to be that unit. So then where do you go? We had some injuries here and there and some things that didn't go our way, but dissecting from a personnel standpoint, what do we need? Schematically, what do we need? That's the main part of the quote that I wanted to read. So yeah, I don't know what direction they want to go schematically now, because what they wanted to do originally didn't work.
And what they wanted to do originally is basically be a power running team.
This is what it sounds like.
That's what it looked like.
Right. All right. So where do you go schematically? I don't know what their plans are there.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I didn't know what their plans were coming into this year. That's why I felt
that's a good point.
That's why I felt good about the beginning of the season, because I was like, okay, you got different coaches coming from different backgrounds, a transfer quarterback, a couple transfer wide receivers. Opposing defensive coordinators aren't going to know what this is going to look like when it's all put together. But we didn't. We got instead a very, very bland offense that was
did
easy
not
to
come
defend.
to fruition.
Right. So this is from Shelton Moss, one of our stats guys who does such a great job. He keeps, I don't know how many Excel spreadsheets he's got with stats. Probably filling up a whole
Shelton
hard
has
drive.
a beautiful mind.
He is. Just wanted to give you an update on the Virginia Tech offense numbers for potential use on the podcast tomorrow. At the conclusion of the regular season, Virginia Tech finished 125th in S&P Plus offense with 13.5 adjusted points per game. Adjusted points per game is it's adjusted to the strengths of the defenses that you play.
Okay.
Since 2005, at the Power 5 level, only 2 teams have been worse. 2005 Syracuse and 2014 Wake Forest. So as we've covered before, that's Virginia Tech is third worst since 2005.
In Power 5 offenses.
That's over 1,100
That's not
teams.
just ACC, that's Power
Power
5.
Five. So that's over 1,100 teams in that span.
No, it's not FBS, it's Power 5.
Okay.
Right. All right. I went back to 1980, deep into the archives, and found 7 major conference teams that had a worse adjusted points per game than Virginia Tech did this year. Therefore, it is not a stretch to say this was a bottom 10 offense in modern major conference football history.
Holy cow.
So 1980, that's before I was born, and I'm not exactly a young man anymore.
Before Katie was born, too,
Right.
she likes to remind
You were
us.
in high school.
I was a sophomore.
Okay, so this is Tech has had bad offenses before. They haven't had a historically bad. I mean, like this is an offense for the ages. Wow, and I don't mean that in a good way. Okay, that doesn't just happen because your quarterback's not good enough or your running back's not there. Everything has to happen for it to be this bad. So they've got a lot of work to do. So I'm going to be focusing on the transfer portal and things like that, but. You know, they got a new quarterback from the portal last year, and they got 2 new receivers from the portal last year. And Jaden Blue played worse this year than he'd ever played before in the past. And Grant Wells played worse this year than he'd ever played before in the past. So, to me, unless they fix their coaching, there's no guarantee that whatever portal guys they go out and grab is going to make Virginia Tech better. So, I mean, we saw offensive linemen that played well in the past for Virginia Tech not play well this year. Okay? A whole bunch of guys on offense for Virginia Tech this year did not play as well as they had played in the past. And it's not because they suddenly became less talented overnight.
So hence the pressure and the reaction when Brent Pry says no coaching staff changes.
Right.
Now, what do you expect him to say publicly? You
Right.
know, and what is he going to do privately? And the answer is we don't know.
We don't know. So I will make a note here. All right, 2014 Wake Forest is on this list. That's the team. That's the 0-0 end of regulation game, right? And now Dave Clawson was the head coach of that football team, and Dave Clawson's an excellent offensive coach. This was his first year at Wake Forest. They were rebuilding, and Wake has put good offenses on the field ever since. Now the difference here was that Wake Forest is Clawson's 4th head coaching job. He'd had 3 head coaching jobs previously, so lots of experience, plenty of evidence that he was a good offensive coach and would turn it around. In this case, you've got Brent Pry, who was a first-year head coach.
And a defensive mind.
And his offensive coordinator had only been an offensive coordinator for 1 year and previously at Fordham. So you've got so much inexperience. Like with Clawson, you'd be like, okay, wasn't good this year, but this guy's got a history of 12 years or so of being a very good offensive coach. And he also had a history of like turning around bad programs and steadily building them up over time. So he had a long leash based on his history. Just because these guys are inexperienced doesn't mean it's not going to work. It might. We could see that type of turnaround. But it also means they have a shorter leash because there's no past history of success of turnarounds.
Well, and you know, the pressure now is measured in millions of dollars. Virginia Tech's fan support this year was excellent.
Incredible.
62,000 for an 11 a.m. game against Wofford. I think they sold out Georgia Tech, and it rained.
Close to it. Miami was a sellout.
Yeah, you know, so the fan support the first year was excellent. And everything I hear through back channels is that they believe in Brent Pry. They love Brent Pry. We all love Brent Pry.
Right.
We just want the on-field product to go better.
Yeah, if Tech wins with Brent Pry, he's going to be a really fun guy to win with.
Yeah.
So that's why we really want him to win.
So this is kind of a piggyback question, and I don't think there's even a right answer here. How do you convince a guy in the portal, it has to be a culture thing, come play here, even though we just won 3 football games and it's looking bleak?
You have got to be a salesman. You have got to paint a picture of a vision, because you certainly can't look at what happened this past year.
No.
And people are going to negatively recruit you on that. If there's a kid in the portal and he's like, and he tells, South Carolina or Syracuse, yeah, I'm talking to Virginia Tech too. Oh, you got to tell the kid is look at Virginia Tech stats from last year. So it's a sales job, to answer your question simply.
These days, you've got these armies of analysts. So if we're recruiting a portal quarterback for another Power 5 school, they're going to be like, hey, did you know Virginia Tech has one of the 10 worst offenses of all time since 1980? Right. So
That's still jaw-dropping.
A well-run analyst team will listen to this podcast and cut that out and play it.
well,
for
the
someone on
well-run
the floor.
analyst team will already know that.
Well,
Like, they're going to research their opponents on the recruiting trail. I mean, at least they should. If you've got these big analyst
remember,
staffs,
Shelton's a unique person. Not everybody knows that they Shelton.
you're right. You're right. But I think defensively, I don't think it's as hard. I think you've got a proven defensive staff.
Yeah, defense did a good job.
I think players developed on defense this year at a pretty good rate. I always look at it from the standpoint of I'm biased as a Virginia Tech fan, of course. So I try to take off my Virginia Tech hat and be like, okay, if I went to some random school that wasn't Virginia Tech and I had a kid who was and my kid was in the transfer portal or a recruit or whatever and was getting recruited, especially let's say he was a transfer portal guy and he was 1 or 2 years left and he just wanted to get the most out of those 1 or 2 years. Like if he came home and said, yo, I got offered as a wide receiver or a quarterback to Virginia Tech, what would I say? If I looked up the numbers and really started researching it, could I be like, yeah, that'd be a great choice for you to spend your final 1 or 2 years to go play in the Virginia Tech? I mean, I'm trying to be honest here.
I would look at the stats and say, how's their NIL program?
Right.
Well, that's a phenomenal segue right there. This is a critical time for NIL to step up and make an impact here for Virginia Tech. So a couple of years into NIL, how can it affect the transfer portal, specifically this offseason and specifically right here in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech?
Well, I think that I don't really think of it yet in terms of the transfer portal. I think of it in terms of retention. Mm-hmm. We all know there are 3 or 4 or 5 players on this team that must be kept.
Right.
And that work and those negotiations are going on now. So I want to take this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about NIL, which I feel like Tech Sideline has a responsibility to educate our readership and our listenership and our viewership on what's going on with NIL at Virginia Tech. I've stayed back from it because it's trying to hit a moving target, but I think that's coming to an end. So
Right.
What I mean by that is we've all heard the term collective, and a collective is an NIL organization that I don't want to call it raises. They gather money. And they gather it
collect
different
money.
ways. They collect money from business,
Collectives.
from businesses, from donors, big donors. So that's where the big money comes from, businesses and big donors. And then there's a third leg to it, which is kind of crowdsourcing from smaller contributors. So they collect the money, they sign the athletes to contracts, and then they dole the money out. That's what a collective does. And we've all seen the headlines, some of the headlines nationally. And the one I always go to is Texas Tech. This was several months ago. Texas Tech came out. I think it was Texas Tech. Their collective came out and said, every football player on the Texas Tech team will make $25,000.
Wow.
As a minimum. So
Wow.
even the backup offensive lineman who never plays will get $25K. The star wide receiver will get more because he'll have more endorsement opportunities. So that's a collective. So in Virginia Tech's case, they have 2 collectives. There's Commonwealth NIL and Triumph NIL. And then there's a third NRV NIL, which is smaller. So those are the pure collectives that Virginia Tech has. And then there's another organization involved in NIL with Virginia Tech that is just now really hitting the ground running, and that's the Hokie Way. Now, the Hokie Way is not a pure collective. They're a little different. What they do is, and I always have to look at this, they are set up as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we'll get to why that's important here in a second. What they do, and I'm going to read it straight from their website. The Hokie Way annually seeks and receives proposals from charitable organizations across the Commonwealth, so it's in state. Approximately 10 organizations are selected annually to receive services from student athletes in support of the organizations. So that's where a lot of the Hokie Way's efforts so far have been, is in selecting key nonprofits around the state that they want to support. And they themselves are also a nonprofit. So that's the connection part of what they do. The serve part of what they do, and follow me on this, they work closely with collectives and sports marketing agencies. So in other words, the Hokie Way will work with Commonwealth NIL, Triumph NIL, and NRV NIL. And they work with agencies that facilitate NIL relationships with VT student athletes. So what that means is the Hokie Way is not going to go out and sign athletes to contracts themselves. They are going to, similar to a collective, they're going to collect money from businesses, big donors, and they also have a crowdsourcing component to what they do. But once they collect that money, they are then going to funnel it, and funnel sometimes has a negative connotation. They're going to pass it through pure collectives to the student athletes. And what the student athletes are going to do in exchange for that NIL money is they're going to promote the nonprofits that the Hokie Way is affiliated with. Wow. So let's say the Hokie Way is affiliated with nonprofit A, where you might see Hunter Couture, for example, promoting nonprofit A through his social media feeds or whatever. So that's the way the Hokie Way operates. And what's unique about the Hokie Way is since they're a nonprofit, any money that you donate to them is tax deductible. So here's the hook. And here's my pitch to Virginia Tech fans right now, and it ties into everything we've been talking about. From now until the end of the year, any contribution made to the Hokie Way will be matched by an unnamed person/entity up to $200,000. So if Virginia Tech fans pile into the Hokie Way and contribute $200,000 between now and the end of the year, there's another organization or person that's going to match that, and that's $400,000 that can go through the collectives. And it's important because right now Virginia Tech is trying to retain their best players.
Right.
And that's $400K that can be used to retain your best players at this moment in time. So go to thehokieway.org. Phone, computer, doesn't matter. I've looked at it on both of them. And the beauty of thehokieway.org is you don't have to scroll either at all or very far before you see the button that says donate. Click it. It's an easy process. I looked it up this morning. Our last podcast last week has 5,500 views. Now, that doesn't mean somebody watched the entire thing, but it's got 5,500 views on YouTube. If all 5,500 people contribute $10, that's $55,000. The other entity will match it. That's $110,000.
Yeah.
And everybody's out $10 and you get your tax deductible receipt at the end of the year.
Right.
Now, if everybody who watches our podcast donates $100, that is 55. That's $550,000. Am I doing that right? I used to be really
Don't
good
ask
at
me.
math.
I'm a common
You're the math guy here, not me.
So,
it's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money that can be used to retain guys that the coaching staff wants to stay on this team.
And I think most of us know who those players are.
Yeah. And we're not going to sit here and name them because, if we don't name other players,
Right,
that looks bad. But you all know who they are. You know who Virginia Tech's best players have been this year, and that's who the coaching staff knows it too, and that's who they're trying to retain. So if you're watching this archived, if you're watching it live, keep watching and keep listening. If you're watching or listening archived, hit pause right now. Go to thehokieway.org, click donate, and come back in 2 minutes because that's all it's going to take.
And also look at the people who are involved in the Hokie Way when you're on the website.
I meant to mention
a lot of very impressive people.
Yes.
Yeah, Virginia Tech alum.
Yeah.
Athletic alum.
Lots of them.
They have a very impressive board. So let me list them. Jim Petrine, board president. Jim Pearman. These are names that if you've been involved in Virginia Tech governance and fundraising, you recognize these names. Jim Cowan, who is the legal part of it, I believe. Justin Robinson, we all know who that is.
Yep.
Nick Rush, who is the principal of Commonwealth NIL.
Okay.
So again, there are people on the Hokie Way's board who represent Triumph and Commonwealth. Bridget Ryan Berman.
She's been the CEO of a lot of big companies.
Google Bridget Ryan Berman. You will be very impressed.
She's a tech grad who's been a CEO of multi-billion-dollar companies across the
you
world.
will recognize. Yes, she has a very impressive resume. Tyrod Taylor, I'm not sure if you guys know who that is. I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Jayla Tolbert. Jalea. Well, okay, so
Former volleyball player.
well, it's a former volleyball player. Thank you, David. And then Kelly Woolwine, Kelly started a Hot Route NIL that merged with Triumph.
Gotcha.
So I believe Jim Cowan is the principal from Triumph. So you can see the relationship between the Hokie Way and the other collectives, but that's a super impressive group of people. So that's my pitch.
Somebody in the comments has already donated.
Somebody in the comments has already
Thank you.
donated. Thank you.
Said it's very simple.
Awesome.
There it is.
Well, we're very excited for the month of December. Again, be partnering with the Hokie Way. So thank you very much to all that intend on donating. Promise we're going to get to David as soon as we get through this one right here. If you each had to give me 3 major steps forward, and maybe they're minor steps, I shouldn't say major steps, that you want to see happen this offseason for Virginia Tech football, what would they be?
I think
you got to pick only 3.
He's already answered this. He's got to make sure he's got the right offensive coaches. We can only get so much better by improving our talent level.
Right.
He's got to make sure he has the right coaches. If these guys are the right coaches, great. If they're not, I suspect we'll know it after next year.
I suspect we will too. So I would kind of refine what you just said to, he knows what he's got as far as backgrounds and things like that in his coaching staff. Whatever it was they wanted to do at the beginning of the year didn't work. Sit down, start with a clean sheet of paper, figure out what you do think will work with the talent you've got on hand. And I keep going back to the running game did not have much variety to it. Mix in some read option stuff, some jet sweep action. I do not believe the wide receivers had a single rushing attempt this year.
Oh, that's not true. Colbeck had one. Dwayne Lofton had one.
Dwayne Lofton's had a couple.
There were
there weren't very many.
But there were I would say there were probably less than 5 jet sweeps for the entire
Yeah.
And the weird thing was the action wasn't even there in most games. And in some games the action was there, but they didn't hand it off. So
it
anyway.
improved as the season went along.
I think Gosnell had one as well.
So
I think you're right.
That's
getting very specific.
That's getting very specific. All right, so, but yes, you're right. Right, they started from scratch last offseason with their system. They're basically starting from scratch again. It's disappointing. It's like year 1 again in year 2. But at the same time, they have more knowledge about their personnel this time.
And they also have more knowledge of how they match up with other teams. When all you do is scrimmage against yourself, you can make the argument that you're not sure what you have.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I think you need to, obviously, that's a conversation for next year, though, about the coaching staff. So between now and then, it's just like they got to upgrade their talent level. And most of that comes on the offensive side of the ball, I think.
And a better job in the portal, perhaps targeting more players and doing a better job of getting the ones that
do a better job than you did in the portal.
The one that hurts me is Kobe Turner.
Right.
And I know the wide receiver from Highland Springs probably hurts you too, but Kobe Turner's the one that when you first mentioned his name, I thought, we're going to get that guy.
Yeah. He's from Richmond, from Virginia.
Why would he go to Wake Forest? Well, he went.
Wake Forest wins a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean,
they just went to an ACC championship a year ago.
Right, but they don't have a history of good defense.
Yeah, they're known for their offense, not their defense.
Right, that's true.
So at any rate, they got to do a better job in the portal. So that's another thing. And the other thing is they've got to. This still has to be a developmental program as far as developing from within. The players in the program have to develop. I think we saw defensive development. I don't know about skills development on offense because, quite frankly, I don't think those guys were put in a position to succeed. So it's hard to tell how much a player actually develops.
Well, and the guys you wanted to see develop too, like Malachi Thomas, barely got to play.
Correct.
Battling injury. Keyshawn King was battling injuries all season long.
Right.
And, so I will say I think he looked better this year than he did last year, for what that's worth.
Sure. I thought so too. He's just got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was, and this is getting away from your question, one of the things that was hurtful about the offense this year was the offensive line was healthy.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the times offenses suffer because they have key injuries on the offensive line. This team did not.
We knew going into the season that this line had no depth. So for me, it was
Don't lose anybody.
We can't afford to lose anybody on the offensive line due to injury. I thought the starters were going to be fine because the starters have all played well. Well, 4 of the 5 starters had extensive past experience of playing well. Yeah. So I was like, okay, the starters are going to be fine. Just don't get hurt. Well, they didn't get hurt.
And then the offense struggled.
And and all the returning players basically regressed, or at best stayed the same. So that has to, whereas on the defensive side of the ball, you saw everybody's PFF grades go up. Some of them substantially. On offense, you saw some guys substantially drop. Yeah. That's got to get going back in the other direction.
Yeah.
Price said that he wanted to see quarterback competition. He wanted to see competition in every room. Do they look at quarterbacks in the portal?
I definitely think they will. I don't know how you couldn't. You got to make sure you get the right guy. Penn State has a guy that just entered the portal.
I saw that. Yeah.
That Tyler Bowen recruited.
Okay.
From Maryland, Christian.
Starts with a V, ends with an X.
Yes, one of those names.
Yeah.
He's from Maryland originally. Got beat out by the #1 quarterback recruit in the country this year. So no shame, right? I don't know much about him, though. He had some decent stats his freshman year at Penn State. He's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. It was a limited backup role, though. I don't know anything about his mobility or anything like that, but he would have familiarity with Tyler Bowen, and he's a guy that's got multiple years of eligibility left. Yeah. So he fits the profile of what I'm looking for, though he lacks game experience. Yeah. But again, I don't think if I don't know if name me some. If Indiana's quarterback, whoever that is, I don't know who he is. All right, if he enters the transfer portal. Like, he's not coming to Virginia Tech.
Right. If you're entering, you're looking for an upgrade at that point.
Right. And Virginia Tech's offense is not an upgrade for a current starter at the vast majority of schools, quite frankly.
Well, so not in the last. Yeah, they're bottom 10 in the last. What did you say since 1980?
Grant Wells would have been better off, quite frankly, staying at Marshall. Just from his own personal development standpoint.
Yeah.
And winning games. Marshall has had 1,400-yard rushers each of the last 2 years. They're a complete offense. Now, they didn't get as good a quarterback play this year without Wells, but they could still run the ball.
Right. And he had good receivers.
They would have been better off if he had stayed, right? So, which tells me that he wasn't a problem for the Marshall offense.
Right.
So the 3 things are to get your offensive philosophy, scheme, and such settled. Get good talent from the portal. None of this is all Captain Obvious stuff.
Right.
Fill some key slots through the portal and continue to develop guys. I'm interested in seeing is Devin Farrell going to take a step up in the offseason?
I want to see that too.
We're all talking about going to the portal. Well, how about some competition from right here on your own team?
Right. Yeah, and whether or not they take a guy at certain positions, they've watched their younger players over the last season, even their guys who were redshirting in those Sunday night scrimmages. So maybe you feel like you don't need if one of those 2 defensive tackles leaves, maybe they don't go into the portal to replace him because they feel like Malachi Madison or Lamar Law has done a good job developing in those Sunday night scrimmages, and he'll be ready to be in the 2 deep next year. Right. Stuff that we don't know right now. I will say, as far as offensive, I'm not worried about defense. I'm not saying it's going to be like a top 10 defense next year or anything like that, but I'm spending 90% of my time worrying about offense and the other 10% of my time worrying about special teams, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's true. That's very
true. Because that's a big, special teams were bad this year too. Outside of one game and one guy.
I thought the result, I know it was just one game, but I thought the result of the Liberty game was very telling. Virginia Tech's offense kept Virginia Tech's defense off the field. If I remember correctly, Liberty only ran 53 plays, and the defense was there at the end when you needed them.
You're right.
And again, Liberty's not great, et cetera, et cetera.
Here's the thing. Hugh Freeze had 1 foot out the door.
True.
They went the next week and lost to New Mexico State by 35. All right, they aren't very good, and their coach had 1 foot out the door.
My counter to that is, in the first game of the season, the defense coughed up the winning score to ODU.
Yeah.
So, that's apples and apples.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But ODU's head coach at least had his both feet in at that point.
So this is
basically what all right, main point I want to make here. They're going to transfer. They're going to target a lot of transfer portal guys, particularly on offense. They've got to figure out real quick what kind of system they want to run.
I don't know.
Like literally this week they have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because they got to start recruiting these guys
While they're
next week.
meeting with players and
Right.
doing,
They can't sit here and be like, okay, we're going to take this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy,
And then make it
now
work.
let's sit down in January and figure out what offensive system we want to run.
Yeah.
Right? They have to figure that out now in a very short time.
Yeah. All right. So, Gio, when you and I were planning the show last night, we were talking about what we were going to talk about in the first half, and you're like, "Is that enough material?"
Yeah,
to,
I think we knocked that one out of
and
the park. There.
we're at like 55 minutes in. So,
perfect.
yeah, I was like, "Don't worry about it, man. We'll take it and run with it."
All right, let's get David involved before he falls asleep on us with this 10 a.m. start time. So, David, what you got over there in the fourth chair?
Well, there aren't any really questions, but I do have a couple of notes. Of course, some football notes real quick. Virginia Tech announced yesterday or in the past 2 days, D'Angelo Hall is named to the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, so he's going to be inducted in the spring.
My response to that is D'Angelo Hall wasn't already.
Not
Right,
the
what
Virginia,
took so
not the
long?
Virginia.
Oh,
Tech,
I know the Virginia.
but
yeah.
yes, I said the same thing. Of course, Georgia Tech hired Brent Key, so now the Battle of the Techs is now the Battle of the Brents.
Battle of the Brents.
Did you see
Oh,
their
man.
players' response in the video?
I didn't know. No, I didn't.
The athletic director gathered him in the auditorium, and they didn't know who the head coach was going to be. So he basically talked to him for about 40 seconds, and I'd like to present you with your new head coach. And then Key walks in the room, and they all erupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Nice.
that's the guy they really wanted. Not that that's always the right guy that
Yeah.
the players want, because Miami has hired players, coaches before, and it turned out to be a massive failure. But there are results there for Key. He did
Yeah,
a good
that's right.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beat Virginia Tech, so that's something.
Is it?
Maybe. I got really sad because the Pitt trouncing of Miami marked the end of the ACC Coastal Division regular season football games. So the ACC has one more Coastal Division game to play, and that's North Carolina representing the Coastal in the ACC Championship. And then the Coastal Division's gone forever.
Ugh, what a great game that'll be. Those teams combined for 3 losses in a row.
Maybe not forever. Didn't they say it's like a 3-year plan?
It's
And then they'll reevaluate?
it's through 2026, but
Yeah, they've laid out the scheduling model for 4 years, I think.
Gotcha.
yes.
Yeah.
But we'll see. And the other notes I have are basketball. Of course, the ACC leads the Big Ten Challenge 5-4 after last night.
I think it's 5-3. Yeah, Nick says 5-3.
5-3. Sorry, yes, I did my math. I had the correct tally marks down. I went through and tallied, but I didn't add it up correctly. So yeah, the ACC leads 5-3. Of course, Virginia Tech won the other night.
We usually lose that thing, so that's good.
The ACC SEC Challenge is going to start next year. And my understanding is that's because of ESPN is no longer going to be doing anything with the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, they're like, we'll give the Big 12 something else to do. But yeah, so that'll be a nice mix of.
The first game's going to be Virginia Tech,
Texas A&M.
Absolutely.
Would you play it in Castle or would you play
Save it for the second
Play it in
segment.
Castle. Play it in
They
Castle.
probably play it in
Yeah,
Castle.
Gio's right. We're going to talk about basketball in
Yeah,
the second segment.
But
I promise we're literally leading off with that. We're talking ACC, SEC Challenge. Awesome. Anything else for us, David?
no, nobody had any questions.
Cool.
So.
David's going to join us on the set for the second half, I believe, right, Will? Is that
Yes,
correct?
he is. I have to
Okay.
go start. Brandon Patterson's got an article that he sent for today, and then I have to start on my articles for the rest of the week.
Chris,
So.
I got one strength and conditioning question for Chris.
Sweet.
Eric Fisher, is there something strength and conditioning can do to keep guys healthy?
Get guys bigger. I mean, some of these guys just don't have big frames to begin with. Like Keshawn King, he isn't what you would call big boned, right? The key for a lot of guys who start out that size is to not play early.
Like
Both
a Cam Johnson, I think, is a prime example.
Yeah, like Cam Johnson. Here's how I would handle it. If I had a 160-pound freshman quarterback or cornerbacks, and he's at times getting hit by guys twice as big as him, like I would do very little contact work with him that first year. Just all skills development and all weight room. Look, y'all, everybody laughs at me when I say that. I just feel like nobody else knows what they're doing when it comes to stuff like that. And I rarely feel this way about myself as far as like I know better than everybody else. but I seriously, like, Malachi Thomas needed the red shirt. Keyshawn King needed the red shirt. And in those initial red shirt years, you're just spending all your free time in the weight room with protein shakes, mass gainers, everything, putting on weight. So when you finally do get out there on the field, you've gained a bunch of weight and a bunch of body mass, you're less likely to get hurt.
You're a man instead of a boy.
So that's how strength and conditioning helps it.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, right. They're just, Tech has had to put, or chosen to put, too many guys out there on the field too early in their careers before they're physically ready. And as a result, they're getting hurt. And it kills their development long term.
All right. We're talking lots of basketball on the other side of the break. Thanks so much for being with us on this Wednesday morning. It's the TSL Podcast. We'll be back.
During the break, go to thehokieWay.org, and donate.
Donate. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back here on the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the First Bake and Trust Company. We switched up the set a little bit. David Cunningham sits in Chris Coleman's seat. Carter Hill now in the fourth chair. Nick Brown still behind the scenes producing. Giovanni Heater, Will Stewart with you as well. All right, let's talk a little bit of basketball, guys. ACC Big Ten Challenge. Hokies beat Minnesota a couple of nights ago, 67-57, the final score on Monday. It seems like this was a game that right from the opening tip, Virginia Tech dominated, let Minnesota get into the game the last minute a little bit, but they were up by 15 plus for a good portion of that ball game.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it was Virginia Tech's best game, but Tech was fine defensively, and I think we've kind of seen that as a trend for most of the season. The Hokies have been good defensively, and that's kind of anchored them. But I mean, Mike Young had a great quote after the game. He said it looked like they were playing pickup ball in July out there, and he's like, and I sure don't like it in July. I don't like it even more in October or November. So I think the ball got stuck too often on offense. The ball wasn't necessarily moving, but Tech kind of canceled out what Minnesota was trying to do offensively. Had a big 13-0 run in that first half, and that kind of propelled them to victory.
Yeah, I thought Minnesota made a few shots early, and then, it's the only time I've seen Minnesota play. They just didn't look like a very good basketball team. I don't want to insult them, but I wasn't really worried about it after a point. And maybe that feeds into what Mike Young said, because I felt like after a certain point, Virginia Tech's going to win this thing.
Well, it was like a 20-point game.
Yeah, and it's natural to slack off.
And it was kind of a sloppy end of the game. They should have won by more than 10.
Tech put its bench in and then gave up an 11-2 run over the final 140. So, it went from being a 20-something point game to being a 10-point win.
It went from being a cover to not being a cover.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Justin Mutz, 16 points and 9 rebounds. The guy just seems like a double-double machine. Obviously, that's not a double-double, but it's pretty darn close. A rebound away. Sean Padula led the way in scoring with 17 points. He also tallied 4 rebounds and 2 assists. Padula has looked, I shouldn't say much improved compared to last year, because he just didn't get the same amount of minutes and he didn't have the starting point guard role. But, man, he is crafty and he looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting because Sean admitted after the game that he did not have a great preseason, and which kind of echoes what Mike Young had said and what I had heard.
Right.
And Sean's like, my shot was not falling at all, and he's playing very, very composed. He's had moments. I think he had a couple moments in Charleston, and he had maybe one bad shot against Minnesota, just shots that he shouldn't take, or it would be better if Tech found a different shot there on that possession. But he's controlling the game. And Virginia Tech, that offense has been pretty good. It could be better. But when Padula gets downhill, I mean, we saw him. He scored 11 points in that 13-0 run, which kind of pushed him out front. And, he kind of told me after the game, it was kind of just like, that's the way they were guarding me. Like, I kind of realized, okay, I can take advantage of this, and just went. And he's very crafty, can get to the rim, and I still think he could be better. Like, I think he's been good. He didn't have a ton of assists, but that's because he was scoring more. So
he's only averaging 4 a game. So.
Yeah, again,
his assist to turnover ratio is good, though. It's almost 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He's not turning the ball over, and I think it's kind of tough for guys to necessarily get a lot of assists in Mike's system, just because of when it's on, the ball's moving so much that it's not one point guard distributing to one guy who's scoring.
The system is the point guard, is what I've heard.
The system is, it doesn't matter who gets the open look. Somebody's getting the ball to that guy, and that guy's shooting the ball. Yeah. So
Padula's also shooting at 51% from the field, 37% from beyond the arc. So, I mean, he's shooting the ball pretty well, too.
So I love him around the basket. I went to the game with Clark Rulin, and at one point, Padula did his thing in the lane, and Clark turns to me and goes, I think he's got better post moves than our post players. And I was like, well, he's pretty darn good down in the paint. He can get an open shot. So one thing I like to, I tongue in cheek like to follow this is the ongoing battle between Grant Bazilian and
Justin Mutz
to see who has the most turnovers. They're tied at 18 on the season. Now Mutz has got the argument because Mutz has 27 assists on his 18 turnovers, and Basile only has 15 assists on his 18 turnovers. But I get a chuckle out of just following that, in air quotes, battle. So
What is the deal with the? And it doesn't come from Tech sideline, obviously, but it just seems like across the fan base there is a bit of Grant Basile hate going on. What is the deal with that? Can we put that to rest?
So it's so funny you bring that up because people on the I saw a couple of posts on the message board where people were like, I was going to say something about Basile, then I looked him up and his stats are actually really good.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I don't understand.
Yeah, I think
His defense too is
it's gotten better.
It's gotten better.
It's on and off. I'm very interested to see what this North Carolina game looks like on Sunday because this is Minnesota. I think was the first test where a team had size against Tech, so you finally got a chance to see what Virginia Tech's front court players look like when they were going up against guys that were as tall or taller.
Yeah.
Minnesota had a 6'11" guy and a 7-foot guy in the starting lineup. Basile had 4 blocks.
Yeah, so let me jump in here and say that's a stat that's not close. Basile has 17 blocks on the season. Mutz is second with 7.
Yeah.
So, he's the master of what I would call the recovery block.
Mike said he's a great secondary defender.
Right.
Great at coming
and
over.
Aluma was the same way. A lot of his blocks came from the backside, came from recovery, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think Basile's in a good spot. He's trending up. I think it's just tough. Like he did not play well on Friday night against Charleston Southern, and I mean it was very obvious. Lynn Kidd came in and played very well, and I don't know. I think probably a lot of the fan base after having a guy like Keve Aluma in the starting lineup, you know who's going to be that guy. Basile's a little bit different, right? Like he doesn't score a ton in the post. He likes to kind of spread it out. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of hurt Tech's motion offense a little bit is that a lot of times it's like maybe Justin Mutz is the only guy on the inside and it's kind of passing around the perimeter and you know, the fact that Sean Padula is posting up sometimes more than Virginia Tech's bigs are, starting bigs, I should say, is interesting. But yeah, I think Basile's been fine. I think he's still getting better. They're going to have a big test on their hands with Armando Bacot on Sunday. I mean, and I think one of the big things to watch is how Virginia Tech hedges screens and how the Tar Heels kind of take advantage of that because Tech likes to come off and...
What does it mean to hedge a screen?
So when the ball handler being guarded by somebody gets a screen and say he dribbles to his left, if Armando Bacot screens for Caleb Love and Sean Padula is guarding Caleb Love, Padula's caught in the screen and Padula will kind of drop down a little bit and guard Bacot because when he hits the screen, and Basile will essentially pop out and hedge it so there's no...
So Love can't dribble around Bacot.
Can't turn the corner real quick and drive downhill. Yeah. So you're basically stopping penetration at the source immediately. But the problem is when you hedge out as much as Tech does, and it hasn't necessarily been a problem because I don't think a lot of the teams Tech's played have been really good at passing or they haven't had a really good big man.
Yeah.
But when you're playing a team that can pass like North Carolina, though the Tar Heels have not been great this year.
And it opens you up to the pick
and have
and
a big
roll.
man like Armando Bacot. You know, if it's a Sean Padula Armando Bacot matchup, like it's going to be interesting to watch the backside help from like Mutz come around and basically kind of like defend the rim a little bit and defend the paint because you don't want Love to basically turn the corner with Basile in his face and find a Bacot one-on-one matchup against an undersized guard.
So then there's a secondary rotation that occurs from a guy like Mutz or somebody.
It makes it very interesting. I think so far Tech's been okay because a lot of teams haven't been able to defend it, so it's worked well. But that's going to be a part of the game I'm really interested to see how it works out. But to your original question, Basile's defense, I mean, he had some really, really good blocks.
Like highlight reel blocks.
Mike Young joked that he thought he baptized the guy on one of those blocks. I don't know what Sear thought, but yeah, I think his defense has been good. We saw him get exposed sometimes in Charleston, but he's been improving.
He is Virginia Tech's best 3-point shooter percentage-wise, 43.2%.
That's a high clip.
Yeah, it really is. And
how many has he made?
He has made 19 of 44.
Yeah.
That's a decent. That's
So
not a bad sample
He's
size.
made more threes than anybody else on the team.
Yeah, and I think part of that is it's interesting. I think part of that is Darius Maddox is in a slump right now. Mike Young admitted it. Maddox is in a slump, can't really hit anything. I think
he's 6 of 23 from outside.
Hunter Couture is spending so much time guarding that I think it's kind of getting to him on the offensive end.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Basile being 19 of 44 from outside, Hunter is 18 of 43. So
close.
one less three-pointer attempted, one less made.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. He's wearing himself out on the defensive end.
Yeah, so
He's
it's
the best defender on the team.
So when you think about Tech's starting lineup, those five, right? Padula's been fantastic. Couture is kind of worn down a little bit at times offensively because he's doing so much of the dirty work on the defensive end. And then Maddox is in a slump, which kind of, explains kind of why Basile is shooting. I mean, of course, he's a great scorer. But I think that also kind of explains why maybe as the season pans out and Tech kind of gets back to a normal distribution, so to say, Basile might not be taking as many shots. But, I mean, he's hit a lot of them.
Depends upon matchups, yeah.
Yeah.
And as much as I like to kid about turnovers, the turnovers in the post are, something that they are going to need to cut down on as the competition gets better.
Tech had 6 turnovers on its first 18 possessions in the first half.
Really fast, and then they stopped.
they
And
got a
then
little
the
sloppy.
rest, or maybe it was 17 possessions. And then the other 13 possessions in the second half, they didn't have one.
Yeah.
So I think it was like the 12-minute mark something, the last time Tech had a turnover between then and halftime. So there are just some rough patches, and I think it also depends on who's on the court. And like Mike said after the game, he's like, I can't believe I take Justin Mutz and Hunter Couture off the court at the same time. So I think he's still trying to figure out the rotation. And the fact that Tech gives up an 11-2 run at the end of the game because all 5 starters are off the floor, that's going to happen when you've got your bench in. But I think we've seen some positives from the bench. Poteet has looked good. Kid looked good on Friday. So
I'm digging the Lynn Kidd action. He was hyped in the preseason as being greatly improved, and he is.
Yeah.
And looking further down the road with Mutz and Basile exiting after this year. Correct? Basile's done after this year?
No. Basile has another year.
If he wants it.
Same with Couture. Couture has another year if he wants it.
Wow.
But we know Mutz is
But
done.
Mutz is the only player that cannot come back because
Mutz can find a way.
He's now
Justin
32
Mutz does
years
not
old.
have any eligibility left. Amazingly.
So it's just important that Kidd and Poteet both get better. I like Poteet's offensive game, and defensively, I think he'll get
He
better.
surprised me more offensively than defensively. Like the
I
fact
did not think he'd be as good as he's been offensively.
I think
Who,
a lot of
Poteet?
people thought he'd be a like for like replacement with John Ogiaco. So
He's been
sort
better
of
than-
just with it's a rim protector, right? He's big, he's bulky. How well can he move? And he had a stretch where he scored 6 straight.
I know. Let's see what he's shooting. Where is he? He's shooting 61%. He's 14 to 23 on the
He
year.
doesn't shoot a lot.
Yeah,
but-
but he's got good
And
post moves.
he had those clutch free throws against Penn State and Charleston.
How much eligibility does Poteet have left? 3?
At least
This one and 2 more, I think. Maybe 82% from the free throw
hit
line.
me on the spot. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'll look at your Twitter,
we do have a
David.
fourth
Yeah, I'll
chair
look at your
here.
Twitter.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have Carter.
I'll look at your Twitter. I want to say he's I want to say he's got at least 2 years.
So-
Maybe 2 in a COVID year.
So time to
That's my guess.
seriously develop.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing. I mean, this is Kid's 3rd year in college, and after Friday night, we talked with Kid about just the steps he's taken from last year, where Mike admitted it. He's like, there's no way this kid's going to help us last year. And Kid essentially got in the gym multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and put in the work to, grow both in the weight room, but also grow his game to the point where he's got the athleticism, he's got the tools. He just kind of needed to, I think, figure out a lot of the mental aspect of the game.
Painting with a broad brush, I just didn't see it last year. And this year I see it.
Yeah.
I can see the path forward to being a really good contributor.
If you had to go ahead and give this team right now a letter grade and just grade them out based on what we've seen, heading into the North Carolina game, what are we looking at?
A B, probably.
I think a B.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Um,
Haven't blown it out of the park.
The 3-point shooting, and as Mike always jokes, Mike's like, if and he said this multiple times now, he's like, if the offense and the 3-point shooting is my biggest worry, I'm in good hands.
Oh, good.
And I think a lot of it comes down to like Maddox is in a shooting slump and Couture's exhausted from defense. So like, but I think guys like Collins have been good. When Tech gets into ACC play, I think that's really, or I guess this stretch of 3 games is really going to be a big test. Dayton and Oklahoma State. I mean, those are 3 really good teams. Dayton is not as good, I think, as the other 2, but yeah, I think a B's probably accurate, just because, you know, if you win the College of Charleston game, you know, that's a little bit, but
B+ maybe at that point. Yeah.
I think it's been good. It's what you expect, right? If you said through 8 games, Tech 7-1, after going to Charleston, I think everybody would take it.
Yeah. Well, you know, for me, you talk about the next 3 games and what are they going to tell you about the team. What you see in the next 3 games isn't necessarily what you're going to be seeing at the end of the year. One of the things I love about basketball season is how long it is. And we learned last year not to get worked up over what you see in the beginning of the year, positive or negative.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that can derail you, if you're feeling good about your team, the one thing that can derail you is injuries.
Right.
You know, that's a negative that can happen. This team's not going to get worse during the year. Mike Young is too good of a coach. And it's not like people are going to suddenly figure Virginia Tech out and they're going to lose 8 straight. That is not going to happen. So injuries are the only thing you worry about.
Yeah.
So the upside from what you see in the next 3 games is, you know, take a look at that. If they go 2-1, 3-0, well, 3-0 would be great.
That'd be fantastic.
Even if it's 1-2.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see, like, this is the best competition Virginia Tech is going to play to date, and it's
tough 3 games.
and it's 3 games in a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, 2 of them are at home, granted, and I know they're going to be great showings in Castle, and of course, football's honoring the football seniors
At the UNC game.
before the North Carolina game on Sunday. But just when Virginia Tech is up against a team with as much talent, maybe in some cases more talent,
How do they do?
we've seen this Virginia Tech team, you know, win the ACC tournament. We've seen Mike Young's talent and system pay off. These are kind of like the biggest tests to date this season, and you got 3 in a week, so it's kind of going to test, you know, Tech's ability to stay fit. You know, the guys wear down on the court, foul trouble. We haven't really seen that a ton, and when the bench gets thrown into the fire, you know, who's going to guard Armando Bacot if like Chapel Hill last year? You were there. Tech got into foul trouble
early.
Jalen Haynes came off the bench and got thrown into the game.
You're right.
What happens if there's foul trouble, right? So there are so many different options that we haven't really seen yet this year, but I feel like a B, like 7-1 through 8 games, a B's fine.
So something to look for against North Carolina. I went back and looked at the stats from that ACC semifinal. Caleb Love was 3 of 17 from the field, I think. The team was 3 of 26 from 3-point range against the Hokies.
Yeah.
This stuff has a way of evening out. I would love them to come into Castle and go 3 of 26 again.
It's not realistic.
From outside, but so I think you're going to get not only do they bring everybody back, they add the transfer, can't remember his name.
Pete Nance.
Caleb
Pete
Love
Nance,
had
the 1980s NBA name.
Caleb Love. So North Carolina plays Wednesday tonight in the ACC Big Ten Challenge at Indiana. Caleb Love against Alabama. Now, granted, in 58 minutes because they played four overtimes.
Wow.
Yeah.
He had 34 points.
All right.
Love's averaging 20 a game this year. So that's kind of the up and
He's a guy who
downs.
can either kill you or open a path to victory for you by.
And he takes some of the most awful shots, though, I think I've ever seen. Seriously. Yes, he's
For
very
a
hit or
guy
miss.
with his experience, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been there for a minute.
It'll be
now.
nice. I will say, I'm sure all fans will be like, "Oh my God, it's nice to not play Brady Manick again."
Yeah.
That's a guy I would have liked to have had on my team. I forgot that he was gone. So one quick question: the Oklahoma State game's actually in New York, correct?
It's in Brooklyn. Yeah. I said 2 home and 1 away. Yeah, 2 at home and then on the neutral floor in the Barclays Center.
Yeah.
They'll be back at the Barclays Center for the first time since they had the confetti flying for the
Check
ACC
under the
tournament.
chairs. There's still some confetti there.
Confetti and popcorn. All right, David, I know I ask you this every time that you're on the set, but I would be dismayed if I didn't again. What is it looking like? What do we know at this point in time about Rodney Rice and when we will see him on the floor?
Mike Young said on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so a week ago today, Mike Young said on Tech Talk Live that it would that Monday, they flew Rodney from Charleston to DC to visit his doctors. And Carter, if you want to pull up those Tech Talk Live transcript and read, you could read part of Mike's quote directly. That'd be great. Basically, it's gonna be a longer process for Rice than I think we hope, than Tech hoped. Maybe 3 weeks until he's working out. He's doing individual stuff. If you get into Castle early on Sunday, you'll see him shooting around because he's doing that kind of stuff. But he's not playing 1-on-1 yet. He's not playing 5-on-5 yet. Mike said it might be close to 2 to 3 weeks before he starts playing 5-on-5.
And there is no need to rush it.
Yeah.
It's a long season. If you need to take an extra week, take the extra week.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Carter. You got
I got it pulled up. First off, Petita's 2 years left.
2
Next year, and then the COVID
Next
year.
year, COVID. Okay.
So here's this quote about Rodney Rice. Quote, Rodney saw a surgeon in D.C. on Monday, meaning the day after the Charleston Classic final. We flew him from Charleston to D.C. He got a very good report. The doctor and his physical therapist think it's a little premature to really step on the gas. He's working out, and that will continue to ramp up to full speed. He's still a couple of weeks away, maybe 3 weeks away from being full contact, playing 5-on-5, playing 1-on-1. We just want to make sure that he's squared away health-wise and he's comfortable with that ankle. But he worked out today, looked great. He shot the heck out of the ball and was moving very well. He's the conditioning of some of the older folks in here who've been on the shelf for so long. But he's young and he's a basketball player, and he'll get back squared away here very, very soon.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be the biggest. His conditioning, right? He hasn't played competitive basketball since he was in high school, and now he's trying to step up to the college level and play immediately coming off an injury. No need to rush him back.
And we've talked about this with regards to football before. You can't just do cardiovascular work and run and stuff like that and be game shape. It's a different thing. You know, your level of exertion waxes and wanes during a game, and there's nothing that can accurately replicate that other than actually just playing the game.
I will say basketball is probably better. Football's probably one of the hardest sports to replicate a game environment, because you can, in basketball, you can scrimmage, right? And if he's going 5-on-5 in a scrimmage for 20 minutes, that in a way replicates what it's going to be like, maybe not entirely, but probably 70% of what it's going to be like in a game.
Yeah. And it is different from, in football, you can do cardiovascular work, you can run the stadium steps and build up your lungs, but during a game, you're exerting with your entire body, arms, legs, trunk, all that stuff. And basketball is, I know the post guys bang on each other, but it really is a lot of running back and forth.
Yeah.
That's true.
No doubt about it. All right, big tough stretch coming up for Virginia Tech. Like we mentioned it, you got UNC and Dayton at home. Then you're going to play Oklahoma State in Brooklyn. All three teams, maybe with the exception of Oklahoma State here, have really not lived up to their early expectations. Dayton has fallen out of the top 25. They're 3-4 on the season. UNC has dropped with 2 consecutive losses from the number 1 team in the country to 18th in the country. Dayton's losses are UNLV, Wisconsin, NC State, and BYU. So you do have 2 Power 5 teams in there. UNC losses are Iowa State and Alabama, 2 consecutive losses for the Tar Heels. So, what is a fair performance here for Tech? We mentioned it briefly. Is it a fair performance that they go 2-1? I don't know if you can expect them to win all 3, but is it a disappointment if they don't at least go 2-1, given that UNC is not the number 1 team and Dayton's not ranked anymore and so
on? That Oklahoma State game is going to be tough. I expect Tech to win the Dayton game, especially after what happened last year in Dayton. And the fact that like it's not like they're walking in. It's not like the Oklahoma State game where they're walking into unfamiliar territory and have never played Oklahoma State before. Like recently,
Right.
they saw Dayton last year, and the Flyers returned some of the same guys. I think winning two of those 3 games is probably realistic.
I'd be satisfied with that.
Where do the I guess piggybacking where do they lose?
Tech will win. I think Tech will win the Dayton game, and then pick one or the other. Part of me, I'm very curious to see what this North Carolina team looks like, because North Carolina has been bad.
Yeah, I haven't really seen them play, so I'm going to watch.
Here's
it
the problem: now they're going to be hungry.
Yeah, that's again.
It's not just that. How many games in a row is a team that talented going to lose? Like if they lose to Indiana, that'll be 3 in a row.
I
you
read
think they're going to lose a 4th in a row?
I read somewhere that they
Indiana's good too.
Their like assist to turnover ratio is like 1-to-1. It's
As
like
a
they have
team.
like 80. I think they have 84 assists to 84 turnovers.
Let's see what Virginia Tech's got.
So I think, and again, I haven't watched as much North Carolina as I have like Tech, obviously, but this is a team
Tech has 117 assists and 71 turnovers.
They're 12th in the country.
12th in the country in
Tech,
assist
12th
to
in the country,
turnover
yeah.
ratio.
That's
as
pretty
a team.
good.
They were 4th entering the Minnesota.
Very nice, Nick.
Nick says the Hokies were 4th entering the Minnesota game, which is what Mike said post game. So yeah, I think it's possible to go 3-0, but given what we've seen, given that Tech has not necessarily in like that one big, Tech played 3 games in Charleston, and in the toughest game it faced, it couldn't close out the opponent.
Right.
I would say 2 wins is good. I would not expect Tech to win all 3. I think it'll probably be easier to win at home than at a neutral site, though. But I mean, we've already seen Tech win 2 games on a neutral floor. So I don't know. I'm very curious to see how North Carolina looks tonight against Indiana and kind of how that might vault them into Sunday.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I want to touch on this. I know we talked about it a little bit when you were in the 4th chair, but I think it is very interesting. ACC SEC Challenge will start next season. They're doing away with the ACC Big Ten Challenge. It was played every year since 1999. Tech participated every year since 2004, except they took 2 breaks when they were the bottom team the season prior. That was in 2013, and then in 2017 they did not participate. Overall, they went 7-9 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Now you flip the script. It's a new chapter. ACC SEC coming up next year. Some of the teams that are at the same speed as Tech, you're talking contenders possibly, but I'd say higher than middle of the pack. You're talking schools that are in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range in the conference. Texas A&M would be fantastic to have Buzz Williams come
in
back.
Castle. It's got to be in
It's
Castle.
gotta
You
be
think the
Dean Castle.
students would tell them to quit cussing?
Teams that are of that echelon to Florida, LSU. I think just because of the matchup and geographically, you could see a South Carolina, even though they're towards the bottom. Georgia. How badly I want to see them play like a Tennessee or an Auburn or even an Alabama. It would be fantastic. The thing that could help with that is Duke matches up in the Champions Classic with Kentucky often. They switch out, they rotate whether they play Michigan State, Kentucky, or Kansas. So that, Kentucky will probably play UNC. Virginia will get one of the bigger teams. But maybe an Auburn or Tennessee could be an option.
To see Virginia Tech hosting Tennessee
Would be fantastic.
or even going to Knoxville. I mean, that'd be an awesome crowd.
I think over time, the fans will actually enjoy this more than the ACC Big Ten.
I think probably because it's more
Geographically, yeah.
If you look at the breakdown, Virginia Tech played, if correct me if I'm wrong on this, Gio, they played Penn State 4 times.
They did. 0-4.
Iowa 4 times, 4-0, and then played a bunch of other teams 1 time.
Yeah, they played Ohio State.
For Virginia
and
Tech, it was
Wisconsin.
the Penn State Iowa Challenge. It wasn't the ACC Big Ten Challenge.
Yeah. They got juggernauts, you could, I guess. They got a big names 3 times. They
Ohio
played
State
Wisconsin once, Ohio State once, and they actually won in Ann Arbor against Michigan once.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Under Buzz Williams. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm very interested. I mean, money talks, so it's all going to be about TV and what the best matchups can
ESPN will
can
decide
be.
that.
And like, I don't know who watched Virginia Michigan last night, but like that was a good game.
That was a
Basketball
good
great
ball
game.
came down to the wire. So, and you were texting Chris and I about the Penn State
Clemson
game.
That was a great game.
So
Yeah.
I think it'll be good. I mean, imagine if Virginia Tech basketball, it's hosting or playing at South Carolina, or you're playing Vanderbilt, or
Even though it's
Georgia
basketball, we could call it the Beamer Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you remember the year that Virginia Tech went to Rupp Arena? I think it was 2018-19.
Yeah.
2018-19. Tech went to Rupp Arena, and played. I believe they played Ole Miss, or maybe they played them the year before. Yeah, well, Nick says the year before. Those were good battles. Like Tech came down to the wire, almost beat Kentucky in Rupp Arena, and beat Ole Miss. So, I think, I don't know. It kind of stinks. Like, I enjoyed watching the ACC Big Ten Challenge, but I don't know.
You got to figure
geographically, I think it makes more sense.
You got to figure Kentucky's going to be off the table because they're either going to play UNC or Duke, or they'll play Louisville as part of this. If Louisville ever recovers from where they currently are.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
0-7 Louisville.
Yeah, bad. I couldn't believe that a team could be performing worse than Syracuse, and Florida State and Louisville take the cake. And Syracuse is bad. They lost by 30 plus over 30 points to Illinois last night.
And I appreciate ESPN matching up a pretty good Maryland team with a terrible Louisville team, because Louisville is probably going to lose no matter what.
Right.
So it's nice that ESPN said, here, let's take one of the Big Ten's better teams, which might actually be able to knock somebody else off, and have them just go through the motions with Louisville.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
Again, getting LSU in the castle. I mean, there could be some big potential
Schools you haven't
matchups
seen.
that schools that Virginia Tech hasn't played in, maybe since Virginia Tech was in the Southern Conference.
You got to think too, and actually, I didn't really think of this. If this ACC SEC challenge continues, then Virginia Tech could play against a Texas or an Oklahoma as well. Oh, yeah. And I did not even think of that till this exact moment. Those are two basketball juggernauts as well. So I like this.
Yeah, it's going to bring some different matchups. Mm-hmm. That's good.
It will, no doubt about it. Carter, let's go to you. You got anything for us over there in the fourth tier?
I actually had a question for David. I was looking up real fast. The last time the Hokies played Tennessee in men's basketball was in 1994. So that would be nice to kind of renew that. It's such a regional rivalry. If you consider it.
That's what I mean. Like, can even, the fact that it is a, God, I mean, I've never driven to Happy Valley. I have some friends that are Penn State alum, but I think it's like 8 hours, something like that. Like it's not
about
close.
6 or 7. Yeah.
It's not
anywhere in the Big Ten.
The closest Big Ten school is Maryland.
Right.
And that's not close.
And
that's like Syracuse for us. That's an outlier in the Big Ten.
Yeah. So I think the fact that you're playing South Carolina, I mean, you could get. Think about this: Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, like Florida State. Like these are the matchups. These are the matchups you see in college football all the time in rivalries, right?
Florida State. I think they play every year.
I think
regardless.
they do.
So they might save that.
Throw Miami in there.
Yeah.
But I do think the fact that Virginia Tech could go play at Kentucky or play Tennessee or Vanderbilt or go down to Tuscaloosa or Starkville, there are going to be.
Arkansas is good too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or how about Virginia against Ole Miss and Virginia Tech against Mississippi State? They kind of line up.
I think there are a lot of good matchups, and it's more regional. And when you play them on November 30th, it'll be warmer in the South, you would assume. So yeah, I mean, I think, especially like Virginia Tech, Tennessee, that'd be great. Don't even get me started on the Virginia Tech, Texas A&M. That'd be that'd be hilarious.
I know the rest of the country doesn't really care, but
it'd be great.
That'd be must see TV. And I think the ideal, you want to see Virginia Tech play Tennessee. Let's do that as soon as we get this one out of the way. Let's just first year play Texas A&M.
I'd be there just for the Barber Berman buzz post game.
All right, let's go ahead and talk some Virginia Tech women's basketball now. Carter, did you have anything else?
No,
for
go
us?
ahead.
Okay.
I got something for women's basketball, but I'll save it.
All right, perfect. We'll talk a little bit of women's basketball here. Well, the Hokies have been on an absolute tear, 6-0 on the season. They went 2-0 in the Bahamas in the Baha Mar Championships. Emphatic wins over Kentucky and Missouri, 2 SEC schools. Blew Longwood right out of Castle last night, 89 or a couple nights ago, 89-28 was the final score. They play Nebraska on Thursday in their version of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And they're on the road at Tennessee on Sunday. This is the second year in a row. They've done a little bit of home and away with the Lady Volunteers. I think that this team is just so well-rounded. So many girls can score. Will and I were talking about it last night on the phone. We couldn't believe our eyes when you look at the scoring differential in most of these games. The only time that they've even been close was against Kentucky and Missouri, and they're holding most of their opponents to under 40 points.
Yeah, the defense I think is so underrated for Kenny Brooks, and he would say the same thing. Tech doesn't like jump passing lanes or anything. Tech kind of sits back and is compact and is physical and tries to run the shot clock down, basically say, we're not going to give you an easy look. And teams struggle with that. And it's hard when you're going up against a, ACC Player of the Year, a 6'4" center, right? For people who are driving into the lane. But this team is connected defensively. I think the team is still figuring out stuff offensively, and which is crazy because
Kenny said that, right?
Yeah, which is crazy because they're putting up so many points. But yeah, this team is really, really good. Kind of funny that they play at 1 on Sunday against Tennessee on ESPN2. The men play at 3 on ACC Network against North Carolina.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of overlap. You left out the biggest nugget of all, that they've cracked the top 10. They're number 9 in the country
That's true.
now.
Number 9 in the country.
First time since that 98-99 season.
Right. They said Party Lake is 99 the other day.
Ties the highest the program record. Yeah, this team is good, man. And I think it's been so tough. All right. So I guess interesting over the past couple of years because Virginia Tech's had some really good, talented teams, but hasn't been able to put that final product together. I think of like that 2020 team who couldn't play in the tournament because of COVID.
Right.
That was a really good team. And I think every single year I've kind of looked at it as like, okay, like this team's really good, but how much better can it get for Kenny Brooks? And it continues to get better.
Yeah.
Like he went from getting like Taja Cole out of the transfer portal. She played for Tech in 2019-20. After getting Taylor Emery, then Georgia Amore comes in, and like he's got these great point guards. Elizabeth Kitley and Kayla King have been staples, and then now this year you add, Ashley Owusu and Taylor Soule. It's like they keep adding more and more and more, and keep getting better. And this team is dangerous. I mean, I'm curious. Tennessee's not had a great season.
They haven't. They've been disappointing. Yeah.
Last I saw, they were 2-4. They've played games since.
I think
then.
they're 3-4 now. I'll double check.
Yeah,
Carter can double check.
But
Yeah,
but
they're
this is
3-4.
still going to be a good, tough game. I believe Tennessee's going to have it sold out. Chris Hirons will be there for us for Tech
Is he
Sideline.
traveling to Knoxville?
Yeah, he is.
Nice.
So Hirons will be there.
We're sending broadcasters there for 3304. Carter and Kyle are going, and then
That'll be an awesome environment.
Yeah.
If the men weren't hosting North Carolina, I would go. But yeah, they're looking really good.
yeah. Did you have something, Will? Or you?
Well, I'm looking at the schedule, and you guys are talking about the games that are coming up soon. The ACC schedule kicks off, I don't know if I should use the phrase in earnest, but on December 18th, Virginia Tech hosts Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
How good? I mean, Notre Dame's always good. How
Notre
good are they?
Dame is.
They're in the
I
top
mean,
10.
Notre Dame will challenge Virginia Tech. Yeah, top 10 team.
I'd say Notre Dame,
It's
and
Notre-
Louisville and Tech are the top 3 teams in the
Yes.
North Carolina.
Throw
in the
North
top
Carolina
10
and NC
too.
State in
Sure.
there, and those are the 5.
And on January 1st, you've got North Carolina coming to Castle as well.
Yeah.
So those are going to be, out of conference games, great, they're fine and they're fun, but you're going to know by January 1st. You're going to have a better idea.
Oh, yeah.
Again, the season's long, but those are two games I'm really looking forward to seeing.
We will know after that North Carolina game, and we'll get a glimpse when they play Dare Mabry and Notre Dame, but we will have a good, I think, grasp of whether Virginia Tech is for real or not, I guess. Like whether this Virginia Tech team can actually go on and win an ACC championship.
I think that one thing to be, obviously you can be excited on the men's side. We talked about all that, but the ACC SEC Challenge will also impact the women's side, and they will be playing that as well. So Virginia Tech women going...
The SEC is a great women's basketball conference.
Right.
And like Kenny Brooks joked a couple weeks ago that the only team that really wanted to... One of the only teams that really wanted to play Virginia Tech this year, when they're trying to fill in like the last couple spots on that non-conference slate, was South Carolina. He's like, the defending national champions are like, yeah, we'll play you.
We'll play
And
anybody.
he's like, I've already got the multiple. I got 3 SEC teams on my schedule already. I can't schedule you.
Oh, that would have been awesome though.
Yeah.
Selfishly. Yeah.
So I would put forth that looking at that challenge, that how Virginia Tech performs this year is important to getting better matchups in the future.
Yeah.
In that challenge, because this stuff is, ESPN likes to put big name teams against big name teams, and as good as Virginia Tech is, I don't think they're perceived as a big name team.
Right.
So if you win the ACC championship, if you make a Final Four, that will give them more of an inside track, I would hope, to playing South Carolina or playing Tennessee in the future.
Yeah.
No doubt. Last little bit of information here. Elizabeth Kitley hit the 1,500 points milestone on Wednesday in the Bahamas against Missouri. She is now the 8th all-time leading scorer in program history. Kitley dropped a combined 42 points and 23 rebounds with 5 blocks in the Bahamas. She had 23 points and 14 rebounds versus Longwood a few nights ago. She's averaging a double-double with 19.7 points per game and 11.5 rebounds. She doesn't do it alone, though. I mean, this team is stacked. Kiana Traylor is actually the second leading scorer, but
And she
Kitley
comes
looks
off the bench.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But Kitley looks well on her way to possibly defending that crown.
I don't know what else you expect.
Yeah,
Right?
it's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't really know what new to say about Kitley.
Right.
So who's the good post player at NC State? Is she still there?
She's gone.
Lisa Cunane.
She's gone.
She graduated. She's a year older than Kitley.
Okay.
She actually got drafted by the Seattle Storm, I believe.
Yeah, she was cut.
And then because the WNBA rosters are so small, she couldn't stay on.
Which is crazy because she was so good in college.
Yeah.
I don't.
But so Virginia, and I think both of those NC State games are on ESPN too.
Nice. Awesome. All right, Carter, you got something on women's basketball in the fourth tier?
Well, just to give you guys more ammo. So, yeah, North Carolina is number 6 in the country right now. Notre Dame, number 7. Virginia Tech is number 9. NC State, 12. And Louisville is 18.
Wow.
So they have 5 in the top 18 from the ACC. So a very top-loaded conference for sure. Really good conference in general. So Virginia Tech, you guys touched on it. Number 9 in the AP poll, highest ranking since 1998-99. That season, the Hokies actually lost to Tennessee in the Sweet 16 that year in Greensboro.
I was at that
At the
game.
Greensboro Coliseum, really?
Yeah.
And they lost in the A-10 championship game to Xavier. So maybe the Hokies can go even further this year and potential Final Four run, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
So we should probably do a little segment on TSL today about that 98-99 season.
Let's do it.
Virginia Tech was really good back then, and they were in the A-10. And every team has their kryptonite, and Xavier was Virginia Tech's kryptonite that year. Very frustrating. And I went to that game in the Greensboro Coliseum between Tech and Tennessee, and my memory fails me a little bit. I think Tennessee had 3 players they called the 3 Ks because their first names all ended in K-A. Tamika Catchings, I think, is one of them. We're trying to go. Shamika Holdsclaw for some reason. I don't know if she was actually, that name just comes to mind. I don't know if she played for that team or not. But I sat right behind the basket, and I actually showed up on television at one point. I sat right behind the basket, and that was two teams at two different levels. As good as Virginia Tech was, you knew they weren't going to win.
And the fact that
game.
Virginia Tech's playing Tennessee on Sunday and it's at that level.
Yeah. I'd much rather put this year's Virginia Tech team up against that 1999 Tennessee team, because that was when Pat Summitt had it rolling, and they were just demolishing everybody.
Right.
But I remember sitting on the floor going, now Tech battled. They did okay, but they weren't going to win that game. And that was a Sweet 16 game.
The Hokies have gotten some tough breaks, though. Nebraska has not had the start they were supposed to. You talked about Tennessee actually fell out of the AP poll now.
Yeah.
And they are top 10. They're 3-4. So the Volunteers have been struggling. Tech also, that 99 year, they beat St. Peter's, and we were talking about it before the show. They beat Auburn in front of a sold-out Castle Coliseum in the round of 32 to advance to the Sweet 16.
Well, the accurate term is a full Castle Coliseum. No, actually, they charged for the NCAA tournament games. I remember that now. Tech women's basketball was free back then, but the NCAA tournament games, they did charge for them. But I think it was cheap. It was like $10 a ticket.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, it was general admission. So both those games were completely full.
You remember where you sat?
I sat the tunnel end of Castle, across from the bench, down low in about the 5th row. And that game against Auburn was good. They weren't great, but they were good. But they were not ready for 10,000 Hokie fans in Castle Coliseum. And Tech just, people use that phrase, punch them in the mouth. Tech came out and punched them in the mouth. Made three-pointer, and it was over. And the rest of it was just
damage control.
I don't remember the exact turn of phrase I used, but I remember the Auburn point guard shot an air ball, and the Tech fans got on her. And I think when I wrote the game up afterwards, I said something like she was ready by the end to curl up in a fetal position in a rubber room with a teddy bear. I mean, it was tough. It was somewhat hard to watch, but she got really rattled.
Do you think Castle would fill up again for a women's basketball NCAA tournament game?
I don't think so. Tech was good for a number of years back then. Of course, that team is the one that started, and then Bonnie Hendrickson had some really good teams. And Tech hosted an NCAA regional, I believe it was the 03-04 season. And Penn State came in. They were a really good basketball team, and max attendance at the games was like they had 6,000 for the Penn State game. Okay. So it's different.
Yeah.
And they're as good as they are. They're only turning out about 1,900 fans a game now.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Well, they haven't really played anybody yet.
Well, and we'll see what happens between now and the end of the season, because I think that year, with the exception of Xavier, I think Tech went on some insane winning streak, like 23 games in a row.
Wow.
And nobody was paying attention in 97, 98. But in 98, 99, when they started winning like that, there's this thing that happens with fan interest. It is asymptotic, where fans are interested, and then you hit a certain level and it goes like this. Right. It goes straight up. And that could happen.
I feel like Virginia Tech baseball and softball is a great representation. A little bit of that.
Yeah.
Just like, the crowds we saw at the regionals last year.
Maybe I shouldn't undersell it, because look at the turnout for softball. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it depends on what happens between now and then.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. Any final thoughts on basketball before we wrap things up today?
No, sir. We've been going almost 2 hours. I'm good to go.
All right.
Time to eat lunch.
Yeah, let's go eat lunch. That wraps things up today on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Again, go ahead over to the Hokie Way. Please donate.
Now, it's thehokieway.org, not .com.
All right, thehokieway.org. Thanks so much for being with us on your Wednesday morning. For Nick Brown behind the scenes, for Carter Hill in the fourth chair, for Chris Coleman, who was on the set before, Will Stewart, David Cunningham, I'm Giovanni Heater. We'll see you next time.